Sacrificing her to save the crown was a fatal miscalculation. When Alpha King Kaelin Blackwood publicly shatters the bond with his fated mate before the werewolf nobility, he expects tears. He expects begging. Instead, he receives a chillingly calm "I accept," and a departure that brings the grand hall to a deathly silence. This rejection isn't an ending. It is her weapon. As she walks away, the king realizes he hasn't just lost a mate. He has unleashed a chaotic power he cannot control. The silence is deafening. The regret is instant. Buckle up right now. This is "I accept your rejection." The chandeliers inside the Blackwood estate were not just glass. They were history, hanging heavy like the expectations placed on everyone in the room. It was the winter solstice ball, the single most important night for the Pax of the Northern Hemisphere. The air smelled of expensive cologne, roasted venison, and the underlying, metallic tang of pheromones. Seraphina Hart stood near the edge of the ballroom, clutching a glass of sparkling cider she had no intention of drinking. She wore a dress that had seen better days, a pale blue chiffon that had belonged to her mother. It was elegant, but in a sea of red velvet and gold silk, it made her look like a ghost. She shouldn't even be here. A voice hissed to her left. Seraphina didn't need to turn to know it was Lydia Sterling. Lydia was the daughter of the Southern Alpha, draped in emerald silk that cost more than Seraphina's family home. Lydia had been vying for the king's attention for 3 years. Her father was a traitor, another voice whispered back. The only reason she's allowed in is because of the Treaty of 1998. Every eligible female must attend. Seraphina tightened her grip on the glass until her knuckles turned white. They were right. Her father, a former beta, had been exiled for a crime he didn't commit, leaving Seraphina to bear the weight of his shame. She wasn't here to find a mate. She was here because the law demanded it. All she wanted was to survive the night. Go back to her small cottage on the edge of the territory and continue her quiet life as a herbalist. Then, the trumpets sounded. The heavy oak doors at the top of the grand staircase groaned open. His Majesty, Alpha King Kaelin Blackwood. The room went silent, not the polite silence of anticipation, but the terrified silence of prey sensing a predator. Kaelin descended the stairs. He was terrifyingly beautiful. 6'4", broad-shouldered, with hair as black as a raven's wing and eyes that looked like molten gold. He moved with a lethal grace, his power rolling off him in waves that made the weaker wolves in the room bow their heads instinctively. Seraphina kept her head down, her heart hammering against her ribs. Just don't look at him, she told herself. Just stay invisible. But fate, cruel and mocking, had other plans. As Kaelin reached the bottom step, he paused. His head snapped up, his nostrils flared, the golden eyes scanned the crowd, bypassing the preening daughters of Alphas, bypassing Lydia Sterling, who had stepped forward with a seductive smile. His gaze locked onto the corner of the room, on the ghost in the blue dress. Seraphina felt the pull instantly. It was like a hook in her navel, yanking her forward. Her wolf, usually dormant and quiet, began to howl in her mind. Mate, mate, mate. A collective gasp swept through the hall as Kaelin began to walk toward her. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. He didn't look happy. He didn't look like a man who had just found the other half of his soul. He looked like a man who had just discovered a fatal flaw in his battle armor. He stopped 2 feet in front of her. The scent of him rainstorm, cedar, and raw power was overwhelming. Seraphina looked up, trembling. For a second, just a split second, she saw longing in his eyes. Then, A steel shutter slammed down over his gaze. "Serafina Hart," he said, his voice deep and resonating through the floorboards. "Your Majesty," she whispered, sinking into a curtsy. "Look at me." She straightened, meeting his gaze. The connection was electric, a live wire humming between them. She saw his jaw clench. He was fighting it. He was fighting the bond. "The kingdom needs a queen," Kaelin announced, his voice raising so the entire hall could hear. "A queen of strength, of noble blood, of impeccable lineage." Serafina felt the blood drain from her face. She knew what was coming. "You are the daughter of a traitor," Kaelin continued, his voice devoid of emotion, though his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "You have no pack standing. You have no political influence. To mate with you would be to weaken the throne." Lydia Sterling let out a small, cruel laugh from the sidelines. Kaelin took a step closer, leaning down so only she could hear the next part, though the silence in the room was so profound that even a pin drop would have sounded like a gunshot. "I cannot afford weakness, Serafina. Not now. Not with the wars brewing in the east." He straightened up and declared, "I, Kaelin Blackwood, Alpha King, reject you, Serafina Hart, as my mate and queen." The pain hit her like a physical blow. It felt as if someone had reached into her chest and crushed her heart. The bond, which had just bloomed, began to wither and die, sending agonizing shocks through her nervous system. Tears pricked her eyes. Her wolf whimpered, curling into a ball of misery. Everyone watched, waiting for the breakdown. They waited for her to fall to her knees, to beg, to scream, to plead with him to reconsider. That was the script. That was what rejected wolves did. They broke. Kaelin watched her, his face a mask of stone, though a bead of sweat rolled down his temple. He was waiting for it too. He needed her to break so he could justify this cruelty to himself. Serafina took a breath. It was a shaky, ragged thing. She looked at Kaelin, really looked at him. She saw the fear behind the arrogance. He wasn't rejecting her because she was weak. He was rejecting her because he was afraid of how much he wanted her. He was a coward, wrapped in a king's cloak. And suddenly, the pain turned into something else. It turned into ice. Serafina's tears evaporated. Her spine straightened. She lifted her chin, exposing her neck not in submission, but in defiance. "I understand, Your Majesty," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it was steady. It carried to the back of the room. Kaelin blinked. This was not the reaction he expected. "You understand, I do," Serafina said. She took a step back, creating distance between them. "You require a queen who is a politician, a figurehead, someone like Lydia." She gestured vaguely to the side. "You do not require a mate who sees the man beneath the crown." She looked him dead in the eye, her expression completely void of the adoration that had been there moments ago. "I, Serafina Hart," she spoke clearly, "accept your rejection." The words hung in the air. Snap. The sound was audible, a psychic break that everyone in the room felt. The bond didn't just fade, it was severed. Serafina didn't wait. She didn't curtsy again. She simply turned on her heel, the blue chiffon swirling around her ankles, and began to walk toward the exit. "Wait," Kaelin said. It was involuntary. His hand reached out. Serafina didn't stop. She walked past the stunned nobility, past the gaping Lydia Sterling, and pushed open the heavy oak doors. The cold winter wind rushed in, blowing her hair back, but she didn't shiver. She walked out into the night without looking back once. The doors slammed shut behind her. Inside the hall, The silence stretched on for 10 seconds. Then, Kalen staggered. He gripped his chest, his face turning an ashen grey. A low, guttural growl started deep in his throat, a sound not of a human, but of a wounded animal. Your Majesty, his beta, a man named Silas, stepped forward cautiously. "Are you all right?" Kalen looked at the closed doors. His vision was blurring. His heart wasn't just aching. It felt like it was being ripped out of his chest cavity. He had expected the rejection to sever the tie, to free him. But Seraphina's acceptance, her cold, immediate, dignified acceptance, had done something unexpected. It hadn't freed him. It had triggered the void. "She left," Kalen whispered, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. "She just left. Sir, the ceremony." Silas tried to intervene. "Get out!" Kalen roared. The windows of the ballroom shattered. The crystal chandeliers swung violently. Kalen fell to one knee, his claws extending, tearing into the expensive marble floor. His eyes turned from gold to a pitch black. He had thrown away his mate to save his kingdom. But as the madness of the wolf took over his rational mind, Kalen realized he might have just destroyed both. The heavy oak doors of the Blackwood estate thudded shut, sealing the warmth and the light inside. Outside, the world was a monochrome nightmare of grey snow and black, jagged trees. Seraphina didn't run. Running was for prey, and she had decided, in that split second inside the hall, that she was done being prey. She walked to the valet stand, her breath pluming in the freezing air. The valet, a young wolf named Toby, who had gone to high school with her, looked at her with wide, terrified eyes. He had heard the glass shatter inside. He could smell the ozone of the Alpha's rage leaking through the cracks in the masonry. "My car. Please, Toby," Seraphina said. Her voice was steady, but her hands, hidden in the folds of her blue chiffon dress, were shaking so violently she had to clench them into fists to stop the spasms. Seraphina," Toby stammered, fumbling for the keys on the rack. Did he just... The keys. Toby." He handed them over. They were cold metal, biting into her palm. Her car was a rusted 2008 Volvo sedan, a stark, embarrassing blemish amidst the lineup of sleek Mercedes and Bentleys owned by the pack nobility. She didn't care. She unlocked the door, slid into the cracked leather seat, and turned the ignition. The engine coughed, then roared to life. As she pulled away from the estate, the adrenaline that had held her spine straight finally evaporated. The pain hit her all at once. It wasn't just emotional, it was biological. A rejected mate bond feels like a phantom limb amputation. Her chest burned. Her wolf was howling in the back of her mind, scratching at the mental walls, demanding they go back, demanding they submit, demanding they fix it. "No," Seraphina grit out loud, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles popped. "We do not go back." She drove fast, the tires skidding slightly on the icy tarmac of the mountain road. She needed to get to the safe zone. She needed to get to the cottage, but as she checked her rearview mirror, she saw it. Not a car following her, but a shadow, a feeling. The connection to the pack, the telepathic web that linked all wolves to their alpha, was fluctuating, usually. It was a steady hum in the back of her head. Now, it was screaming. Kalen was screaming. Back inside the grand hall, the winter solstice ball had descended into a war zone. King Kalen was on his knees. The marble floor beneath him had cracked in a spiderweb pattern, unable to withstand the pressure of the aura pouring out of him. The void is a legend among wolves, a state of madness that consumes an alpha who rejects a true fated mate. It's nature's way of punishing arrogance. Clear the room, Silas roared, shoving a sputtering duke toward the exit. Everyone out now. Lydia Sterling, however, hadn't moved. She stood 10 feet away from the kneeling king, her emerald dress pristine, her face a mask of calculated concern. She saw this not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. A vulnerable king needed a nurse. A broken man needed a crutch. Kaelin, she cooed, taking a step forward. It's okay. She wasn't worthy. You did what you had to do for us. For the crown. Kaelin's head snapped up. His eyes were no longer golden. They were entirely black, the iris and pupil swallowed by the darkness of the wolf. He didn't see Lydia. He didn't see a woman or an ally. He saw an obstacle. He heard the sound of her voice, and it grated against his ears like sandpaper, because it wasn't her voice. Get out, Kaelin growled. The sound was so deep it rattled the silverware on the buffet tables. I'm not leaving you, Lydia said, feigning bravery. She reached out to touch his shoulder. I can help you through the shift. I can... She made contact, the moment her manicured fingers touched the fabric of his suit. Kaelin roared. It was a sound of pure repulsion. He backhanded her without even standing up. The blow didn't connect with her skin, but the wave of kinetic energy did. Lydia was lifted off her feet and thrown 20 feet backward. She crashed into a table of champagne flutes, glass raining down on her like jagged diamonds. Get them out, Kaelin screamed, clutching his head. The silence make it stop. Silas grabbed 2 guards. Tranquilizers get the ketamine doses. The king is going rogue. Kaelin wasn't going rogue. He was dying. In his mind, he was reaching for the bond, reaching for Seraphina, trying to feel her fear, her sadness, anything. But there was nothing, just a flat, grey static. She had meant it. She had accepted the rejection. She had closed the door. And for the first time in his life, Kaelin Blackwood, the most powerful predator on the continent, felt true, suffocating panic. Seraphina reached her cottage 40 minutes later. It sat on the edge of the Blackwood territory, bordering the neutral human lands. It was a small, drafty place, filled with drying herbs and old books. She stumbled through the front door, kicking off her heels. She went straight to the kitchen sink and splashed freezing cold water on her face. Breathe. Just breathe. She had to pack. She had to leave the territory. Kaelin had rejected her, which meant she was technically rogue now. She had no pack protection. Once the madness settled, he might see her as a loose end. Or worse, the other noble families, like the Sterlings, would come to finish the job to ensure she never returned. She ran to her bedroom and dragged a suitcase from under the bed. She threw in jeans, sweaters, her passport. Then she heard a sound that made her freeze. Click. The sound of a gun safety being switched off. Seraphina spun around. Sitting in the armchair in the corner of her dark bedroom was a figure, a man. He was dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, totally out of place in her rustic cottage. He held a suppressed pistol loosely in his right hand, resting on his knee. Going somewhere? Miss Hart? The man asked. His voice was smooth, cultured, British. Seraphina's claws extended instinctively. Who are you? If Lydia sent you. Lydia Sterling. The man scoffed. Please, I don't work for amateurs. He stood up, tucking the gun into a shoulder holster. He was older, perhaps in his 50s, with silver-streaked hair and a face that looked like it was carved from granite. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, flicking it onto the bedspread. Seraphina glanced at it. It was thick, cream-coloured cardstock. No logo, just a name and a number. Arthur Sterling. Private counsel. Sterling. Seraphina hissed. You are one of them. By blood. Yes, by loyalty hardly, Arthur said. I am the estranged uncle, the one the family doesn't talk about because I chose law over pack politics. And I am here because of your father. Seraphina paused, her hand hovering over a suitcase. My father is dead. He died in exile. Your father, Arthur corrected, is very much alive, and he has been waiting for this night for 20 years. The world tilted on its axis. Seraphina grabbed the bedpost to steady herself. That's a lie. I saw the report. The Alpha, Kaelin's father, he executed him for treason. He executed a clone, a body double-created through blood magic, Arthur said, walking over to the window and peering out through the blinds. Your father knew that the Blackwood line would eventually produce a king who was too arrogant for his own good. He knew Kaelin would reject you. It was calculated. Calculated, Seraphina felt a rise of anger. My pain, my humiliation. This was a plan. Survival. Seraphina, Arthur said, turning back to her with a grave expression. You think you were rejected because you are a beta's daughter. You were rejected because Kaelin sensed the threat, even if he didn't understand it. Your blood is too strong for him. If he had mated with you, your power would have eclipsed his. He rejected you out of instinctual fear. Arthur checked his watch. We have 5 minutes before the king's enforcers get here. When Kaelin realizes he can't feel you, he will send hunters to drag you back. He won't want you as a mate, but he won't let you leave. It's about possession. Where is my father? Seraphina asked, her voice trembling. Safe, in a place where wolves don't go, Arthur said. He moved to the door and opened it. I have a car waiting, an Audi A8 bulletproof, much faster than your Volvo, but you have to choose now. Seraphina, you can stay here, be dragged back to the castle, and live as the king's rejected mistress, locked in a tower, or you can come with me. Meet your father, and claim your birthright. What birthright? Seraphina asked. Arthur smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was a smile of a wolf baring its teeth at the world. The Blackwoods think they are the only royals, Arthur said softly. They forgot about the Blood Moon lineage. They forgot about the true alphas. The sound of sirens cut through the night air. Howls erupted from the direction of the castle the hunting party had been released. Seraphina looked at her shabby room. She looked at the blue dress that represented everything she had tried to be compliant, quiet, invisible. She ripped the sleeve of the dress as she grabbed her coat. Take me to him, she said. The Audi A8 was a fortress on wheels. The leather smelled of new money and gun oil. Arthur Sterling drove with one hand on the wheel, the other tapping calmly on the dashboard console as the speedometer climbed past 110 miles per hour. Seatbelt, Seraphina, Arthur said, his tone conversational, as if they were discussing the weather and not fleeing the king's personal death squad. Seraphina clicked the belt into place just as the first impact hit. A black Range Rover with reinforced bumpers slammed into their rear fender. The Audi shuddered but held its line. Seraphina whipped her head around. Behind them, 3 SUVs were weaving through the snowy mountain pass, their high beams blinding in the darkness. They aren't trying to stop us, Seraphina realized, her eyes widening as she saw a wolf, a massive, russet-colored beast, leap from the moving SUV onto the trunk of their car. Claws shrieked against the metal. They're trying to run us off the cliff. King Kaelin wants you captured, Arthur said, swerving violently to shake the wolf off. The beast tumbled onto the asphalt, rolling but immediately springing back up. But Lydia Sterling, she has friends in the Enforcer Guard. She wants you dead before you reach the border. Arthur slammed on the brakes, causing the Range Rover behind them to swerve to avoid a collision. Then he floored the gas, drifting around a hairpin turn with surgical precision. "Open the glove box," Arthur commanded. Serafina obeyed. Inside sat a flare gun and a small velvet pouch. "The pouch," Arthur said. "Wolfsbane dust, concentrated. Toss it out the window." "That's illegal," Serafina gasped. Using wolfsbane on another wolf was a war crime in the Pack lands. "So is attempted murder," Arthur countered dryly. "Do it." Serafina rolled down the window. The freezing wind roared into the cabin, biting at her face. She saw the lead SUV gaining on them, the driver's window down, a masked enforcer leaning out with a tire iron. She didn't hesitate. She wasn't the submissive girl in the blue dress anymore. She was a survivor. She threw the pouch. It exploded on impact with the SUV's windshield, releasing a cloud of purple glittery dust. The enforcer driver coughed, his eyes burning instantly. The car swerved violently to the left, crashing through the guardrail and ploughing into a snowbank. The other two vehicles slammed on their brakes to avoid the pileup. "Good arm," Arthur noted, rolling her window back up. "We're coming up on the bridge," Serafina said, her heart hammering. "The Pack border." The Blackwood Bridge was a massive steel suspension bridge that marked the end of the supernatural jurisdiction and the beginning of the human world. Wolves rarely crossed it. To cross it was to admit you couldn't hack it in the hierarchy. As the tires hit the metal grating of the bridge, Serafina felt a sudden, violent tug in her chest. It was Kalen, even miles away, deep in his madness. He sensed her leaving his territory. The bond, though severed, had left a scar, and he was clawing at it. "Serafina." His voice echoed in her mind, not a request, but a command that vibrated in her teeth. It was filled with rage, confusion, and a terrifying, possessive hunger. "Stop," she gasped, clutching her head. "He's in my head." "Focus on me," Arthur said sharply. "He is an alpha. You are a beta female. His voice is designed to make you obey. But remember who your father is. You are not just a beta. Fight it, come back." The voice was louder now, drowning out the hum of the engine. "You are mine." Serafina squeezed her eyes shut. She visualized the bond, a thick, golden rope. She visualized a pair of shears. "I am not yours," she whispered. "I belong to myself." She pushed back mentally, imagining a steel wall slamming down. The connection snapped. The silence that followed was ringing. They crossed the midpoint of the bridge. The heavy, oppressive atmosphere of the Pack, lands, the constant biological pressure of the hierarchy, vanished. It was replaced by the chaotic, noisy, indifferent energy of the human world. Arthur slowed the car down to the speed limit. He adjusted his suit jacket. "Welcome to America. Serafina," he said. "Or at least, the part of it that doesn't care about the moon." Serafina looked back one last time. The mountains of the Blackwood territory were just jagged silhouettes against the moon. She felt a singular tear roll down her cheek. She wiped it away furiously. "Where are we going?" she asked. Arthur smiled. "To the airport, the private terminal. Your father doesn't live in the woods, my dear. He prefers the view from the top." 6 hours later, Serafina was standing in an elevator made entirely of glass, ascending the side of the tallest building she had ever seen. They were in Chicago. The city was a grid of electric light, a sprawling circuit board of humanity below them. She had changed clothes on the plane. Gone was the ruined blue dress. In its place, she wore a tailored black pantsuit and stiletto heels Arthur had provided. She looked less like a runaway wolf and more like a corporate executioner. "We are heading to the 91st floor," Arthur explained. Helix Global. I know Helix, Serafina said, frowning. They make the suppression tech for the packs. They manufacture the ankle monitors for rogue wolves. They also manufacture the security systems for the human banks and the servers for the government, Arthur added. Your father believes in diversification. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open to reveal a penthouse office that looked more like a museum. The floors were black marble. The walls were lined with modern art that cost more than the entire Blackwood estate. In the center of the room, staring out at the city skyline, stood a man. He was tall, with the same raven hair as Serafina, though his was streaked with dignified grey at the temples. He wore a navy suit that fit him perfectly. He held a tumbler of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light. He didn't turn around immediately. They say that a wolf who leaves the pack dies of loneliness, the man said. His voice was rich, baritone, and commanded the room without raising a decibel. I have found, however, that the silence is quite conducive to productivity. He turned. Victor Hart, the traitor, the exile, the dead man. He looked vibrant, powerful. His eyes were not the submissive brown of a beta, nor the gold of an alpha. They were a piercing, electric violet. Hello, Serafina, he said. Serafina stayed near the elevator doors. She felt a mix of awe and anger. You left me. For 10 years, I scrubbed floors and took insults because everyone thought I was the daughter of a criminal. And you were here, drinking scotch in a penthouse. Victor's expression softened, but only slightly. He walked over to his desk, a massive slab of obsidian, and set his drink down. I left you to keep you alive, Victor said. If Kaelin's father, the old king, had known what you were, he would have killed you in the cradle. I had to play the traitor. I had to die so you could be invisible. Invisible? Serafina laughed bitterly. I was humiliated tonight. Kaelin rejected me in front of everyone. Good, Victor said. The word was sharp. That was the final test. A test. Kaelin Blackwood is a strong alpha, Victor admitted. But he is a slave to the moon goddess's rules. He relies on instinct. He rejected you because his wolf sensed that you were not a subordinate. An alpha cannot mate with a creature more powerful than himself unless he submits. And a Blackwood never submits. Victor walked around the desk and pressed a button. A holographic screen projected into the air. It showed a DNA double helix, but one strand was glowing red. You are not a beta, Serafina. You never were, and you aren't a normal wolf. Then what am I? We are the Blood Moon lineage, Victor declared. Ancient, predating the current pack structures. We don't draw power from the pack. We draw it from the eclipse. We are the only wolves capable of lying to an alpha, of hiding our scent, of shutting out the command. He looked at her with intense pride. I built Helix Global to control the human world. Serafina, money is the new magic. Technology is the new claw. The packs are stuck in the dark ages, fighting over territory in the woods. I own the satellites that watch them. Victor extended a hand. Kaelin rejected you because he wanted a queen who would sit quietly by his throne. I am offering you something else. I am offering you the chance to buy his throne out from under him. Serafina looked at her father's hand. She thought of Kaelin's face when he rejected her. The arrogance, the pity. She realized she didn't want him back. She wanted him to kneel. She stepped forward and took her father's hand. Where do we start? She asked. Meanwhile, at the Blackwood estate, the sun was rising over a scene of devastation. The grand hall was a ruin. Curtains were shredded. Tables were overturned. King Kaelin sat on the steps of the dais. his head in his hands. He was naked from the waist up, his skin covered in sweat and grime. The madness had receded, leaving him hollowed out and exhausted. Silas approached cautiously, holding a tablet. "Your Majesty," Silas whispered. "Did you find her?" Calen croaked. His voice was wrecked from hours of howling. "We found her car," Silas said. "The Volvo. It was abandoned 10 miles from the border." Calen looked up, hope flickering in his dull eyes. "And Serafina?" Silas swallowed hard. He tapped the screen and held it up. Traffic cameras on the Blackwood Bridge picked up a vehicle crossing over at 2 a.m., an Audi A8, registered to a shell company. She crossed. Calen stood up, swaying slightly. She went to the humans. "There is more, sir." Silas swiped to the next image. It was a grainy zoom-in of the passenger seat. It showed Serafina, but it also showed the driver. Calen stared at the man in the driver's seat. He recognized the jawline, the arrogance. "Arthur Sterling," Calen hissed. "That snake." "And—" Silas hesitated. "We received a transmission 20 minutes ago. It was sent to the Royal Secure server. It's a video file." "Play it." Silas pressed play. The screen showed Serafina. She was sitting in a high-backed leather chair, a city skyline behind her. She looked different. Her hair was slicked back. Her eyes were cold. "Your Majesty," the video Serafina said. Her voice was crisp, lacking any tremble. "You told me that you could not afford weakness. I agree. The Blackwood Pack relies on imported grain for the winter. You rely on Helix Global for your security software. You rely on the sterling exchange rate for your treasury." She leaned forward. "As of this morning, Helix Global has acquired the debt of the Blackwood estate. I am not your mate anymore. Calen, I am your landlord, and rent is due." The screen went black. Calen stared at the blank tablet. A low rumble started in his chest. It wasn't anger this time. It was the terrifying realization that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. He hadn't just rejected a girl. He had declared war on a goddess. 6 months had passed since the winter solstice. In the human world, seasons changed gently. In the Blackwood territory, however, it had been a winter that refused to end. The pack lands were dying. The grain shipments from the south had stopped mysteriously. The security systems that guarded the perimeter fences, supplied by Helix Global, had begun to glitch, letting in rogue bears and poachers. Morale was at an all-time low. King Calen Blackwood stood in his war room, staring at a map that was lit up with red warning lights. He looked like a shadow of the god he had been. He hadn't slept properly in months. Dark circles bruised the skin under his eyes, and his cheekbones were sharp enough to cut. "The Sterlings are threatening to pull their funding. Your Majesty," Silas said quietly, afraid to break the silence. "Lydia says her father cannot support a failing monarchy." Calen laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Lydia. She's still painting her claws while the castle crumbles. She insists the mating ceremony happen next week. She believes it will stabilize the pack magic." "It won't," Calen snapped. "The pack is weak because I am weak." He touched his chest. The ache was constant now, a dull, throbbing emptiness where the bond used to be. Every night, he dreamed of blue chiffon. Every morning, he woke up reaching for a woman who wasn't there. "We have no choice, sir," Silas said, sliding a dossier across the table. "Helix Global has agreed to a meeting regarding the debt restructuring, but they refused to come here. They demand you go to Chicago." Calen looked at the dossier. The logo was a stylized DNA strand. "They want the king to come begging," Calen growled. "They hold the mortgage, Sir, technically, you are begging. Kalen grabbed the file. He hated the human world. It smelled of exhaust and deception. But he was a king, and a king did what was necessary to save his people. He had rejected Seraphina to save the kingdom from weakness. Now, he would swallow his pride to save it from bankruptcy. "Prepare the jet," Kalen ordered, "and tell Lydia to stay here. I don't need her perfume giving me a headache." Chicago was a different beast entirely. It was loud, bright, and indifferent to his title. As Kalen's motorcade moved through the streets, he felt the heavy, suffocating pressure of the city. He arrived at the Helix Tower at 2:00 p.m. He was dressed in his finest suit, flanked by Silas and 2 enforcers. He intended to walk in, use his alpha voice to intimidate the human CEO into a better deal, and leave. He walked into the lobby. It was sleek, white, and sterile. "King Kalen Blackwood," he announced to the receptionist. "Here to see Victor Hart." The receptionist, a young woman with glasses, didn't even look up from her screen. "Mr. Hart is in Tokyo. You have a meeting with the VP of Operations." Kalen stiffened. "I do not meet with deputies. I am a king." "And this is a Fortune 500 company," the receptionist said, finally looking up with a bored expression. "You can take the elevator to the 91st floor, or you can reschedule for next month." Silas put a hand on Kalen's arm to stop him from growling. "Sir, the debt." Kalen clenched his jaw. He marched to the elevator. The disrespect was palpable. When the doors opened on the 91st floor, he expected a boardroom filled with lawyers. Instead, the hallway was empty. It led to a single set of double doors made of frosted glass. Kalen pushed them open. The room was vast, dominated by a long table. At the far end, facing away from him and looking out at the grey waters of Lake Michigan, sat a single figure in a high-backed leather chair. "I expected Victor," Kalen said, his voice booming. "I did not fly 3,000 miles to speak to a subordinate." The chair spun around slowly. Kalen's heart stopped. The air left his lungs. It was her. But it wasn't the Seraphina he remembered. The girl in the blue dress was gone. The woman sitting before him was sharp edges and steel. She wore a white power suit that glowed against her tawny skin. Her hair was cut into a sharp bob. Her lips were painted a deep blood red. And her scent. It was there, but it was different. It didn't smell like rain and submission anymore. It smelled like ozone and currency. "Hello. Kalen," Seraphina said. She didn't stand up. She didn't bow. She gestured to the chair opposite her. "Take a seat. We have a lot of numbers to go over." Kalen stood frozen. His wolf surged forward, slamming against the inside of his ribcage. "Mate. Found. Mate." He took an involuntary step forward, his hand reaching out. "Seraphina. Ms. Hart," she corrected instantly. Her voice was ice cold, or Madam Vice President, if you prefer formalities. "You." Kalen shook his head, trying to clear the fog. "You are running Helix. My father is the CEO. I run the day-to-day operations, including the Distressed Assets Division." She tapped a file on the desk. "That's you. You are a distressed asset." "Kalen." Kalen felt a flash of anger mix with the longing. "I am the Alpha King of the North. You are a tenant who is 3 months behind on his security payments," Seraphina countered. She opened the folder. "Let's keep this professional. Your PAC owes Helix Global $400 million in infrastructure loans. You have defaulted." "I can pay," Kalen lied. "It's a temporary liquidity issue." "It's a systemic failure," Seraphina said, locking eyes with him. "Because your leadership is failing, The packs sense your weakness. The void is eating you, isn't it? Kaelin flinched. She saw right through him. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Is this revenge for the ball?" Serafina finally stood up. She walked around the table, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. She stopped 3 feet away from him, close enough for him to feel her heat, far enough that he couldn't touch her. "Revenge is petty, Kaelin. This is business," she said. "You said I was weak. You said I had no political value. I am simply proving you wrong. I did what I had to do," Kaelin pleaded. The desperation leaked into his voice. "The council, Lydia, they demanded a bloodline match. I thought I was saving you from a life of judgment." "You didn't ask me," Serafina said softly. "You decided for me. That is the arrogance of an alpha." Kaelin couldn't take it anymore. The proximity was driving him mad. He needed her to submit. He needed to re-establish the dynamic he understood. He drew himself up to his full height. He let his eyes bleed into the alpha gold. He poured his dominance into his voice, using the alpha command, a tone that forced any wolf to kneel. "Serafina, enough. Come here." The air in the room vibrated. Silas, standing by the door, dropped to his knees instinctively, unable to resist the command. Serafina didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She just tilted her head, looking at him with mild curiosity. "Are you finished?" she asked. Kaelin stared at her in horror. "How?" "My blood is older than yours, Kaelin," she revealed. "The Alpha Command doesn't work on the blood-moon line. I don't obey you. I never did. I just let you think I did." She took a step closer, invading his space. For the first time, he felt small. "Now sit down," she ordered. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that crushed his will. Kaelin sat. He collapsed into the chair, defeated not by force, but by the shattering of his world view. "Here are the terms," Serafina said, sliding a contract toward him. "Helix Global will forgive the debt. We will restore the security grid. We will send grain shipments immediately." Kaelin looked at the paper. "And in exchange, Helix Global gains sovereignty over the Northern Territory's mineral rights. And..." She paused. "You will abdicate your seat on the High Council. You will remain king of your pack, but you will answer to a governor appointed by Helix." "You want me to be a puppet?" Kaelin whispered. "I want you to be safe," Serafina said, echoing his words from the ball. "The council is dangerous. Lydia is dangerous. This way, under my protection. You survive." She leaned in, her face inches from his. "I am saving you, Kaelin, just like you tried to save me." Kaelin looked at the pen. He looked at her lips. He realized, with a sickening jolt, that he loved her more in this moment. Terrifying, powerful, and cruel than he ever had when she was the quiet girl in the corner. He picked up the pen. "If I signed this," Kaelin asked, "will you come back?" Serafina straightened up, her mask slipping back into place. "Sign the paper, Kaelin, then we can discuss the guest list for your wedding to Lydia." Kaelin's hand froze. "I won't marry her." "You have to," Serafina said coldly. "It's in the contract. Clause 4, to maintain stability. The king must take a queen from the nobility." "You want me to marry her?" Kaelin roared, standing up again. "After everything, I want you to be miserable," Serafina thought, but she didn't say it. Instead, she smiled. "I want you to honor your word. You wanted a political match. I am ensuring you get one. Sign it." Kaelin signed. He pressed the pen so hard the tip snapped. "Done," he spat. "Pleasure doing business with you," Serafina said, picking up the contract. "Silas, please escort the king out. I have a conference call at 3 o'clock. Kalen walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the handle. He didn't turn around. You win, Seraphina, he said. But know this. The void isn't just killing me, it's killing the bond. If I marry Lydia, the bond snaps permanently. Is that what you want? Seraphina stood by the window, her back to him. Her reflection in the glass showed a single crack in her composure. Her eyes were shimmering. Goodbye, Kalen, she whispered. He left. As the doors closed, Seraphina collapsed into her chair. She pressed the intercom button. Dad, I'm here, Seraphina. Victor's voice came through. He signed, she said, her voice trembling. He's going to marry Lydia. Phase 1 is complete, Victor said. Now, dry your tears. The wedding is in 2 weeks, and we are going to crash it. The wedding of King Kalen Blackwood to Lydia Sterling was not a celebration. It was a coronation of misery. The Blackwood estate had been repaired, but the scars of the solstice ball were still visible in the mismatched stonework. The guest list was a who's who of the werewolf elite. Alphas from the southern, eastern, and western packs were in attendance. They whispered among themselves, sensing the wrongness in the air. The groom looked like a man walking to the gallows. The bride looked like a cat who had finally caught the canary and intended to eat it slowly. Kalen stood at the altar. He wore the ceremonial gold sash of the king, but it felt heavy, like a chain. The void was a dull roar in his ears now, a constant headache that blurred his vision. He kept waiting for a miracle. He kept waiting for her. But Seraphina had made her choice. She had chosen revenge over love. Lydia walked down the aisle. Her dress was magnificent, a cascading waterfall of white lace and diamonds. She smiled at Kalen, her eyes gleaming with triumph. You look handsome, my king, she whispered as she reached the altar. Let's just get this over with, Kalen muttered. The high priest, an ancient wolf with clouded eyes, raised his hands. We are gathered here under the eyes of the moon goddess to unite these 2 bloodlines. I object, a voice rang out. It wasn't a shout. It was a calm, amplified statement that cut through the priest's droning like a knife. The heavy oak doors at the back of the cathedral swung open. Seraphina stood there, but she wasn't wearing a suit. She was wearing a dress of midnight blue velvet, so dark it looked black, embroidered with silver thread that seemed to glow in the dim light. She wore a crown not of gold, but of woven obsidian and moonstone, and she wasn't alone. Behind her stood 50 men and women in tactical gear, armed not with swords, but with assault rifles loaded with silver bullets. Seraphina, Kalen breathed, his heart kick-starting in his chest. Guards, Lydia shrieked, her mask falling instantly. Kill her, she's a rogue. Stand down, Seraphina commanded. She didn't raise her voice, but every guard in the room froze. She held up a hand, and a hologram projected from her wrist, filling the air above the altar. It was a video recording. The footage was grainy, taken from a hidden camera. It showed Lydia Sterling standing in a dark alleyway, handing a briefcase of cash to a rogue wolf. The poison must be slow, the recorded Lydia said. I want Kalen weak enough that he relies on me, but not dead. And make sure the blame falls on Seraphina's father. Plant the evidence. The crowd gasped. The alphas in the front row stood up, growling. Lydia turned pale. It's a fake A deepfake. She's using human technology to lie to you. Is it? Seraphina walked down the aisle, the sea of guests parting for her. Then why does your scent spike with fear? Lydia? Why can everyone in this room smell the betrayal on you? Seraphina reached the altar. She looked at Kalen. I told you I was saving you, she said softly. I had to let you get this close to the altar to flush her out. I needed her to believe she had won so she would get careless. Kaelin stared at her, the pieces falling into place. You didn't leave because you hated me. You left to build an army. I left because I wasn't strong enough to protect you then, Seraphina said. She reached up and cupped his cheek. But I am now, Lydia screamed, her face contorting into a muzzle as she shifted mid-leap, aiming for Seraphina's throat. Bang! A single shot rang out, not from the guards, but from Seraphina. She hadn't even looked. She had drawn a small silver pistol from the folds of her dress and fired. Lydia crumpled to the floor, a silver bullet in her shoulder. She howled in pain, shifting back into human form, clutching her bleeding arm. "Take her away," Kaelin ordered, his voice returning to its full alpha power. The void in his head vanished instantly, replaced by the warm, brilliant light of the bond snapping back into place. Enforcers dragged a screaming Lydia out of the cathedral. Kaelin turned to Seraphina. He dropped to his knees, right there in front of the alphas, the cameras, and the goddess. "Seraphina," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I rejected you. I broke you. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you." "No, you don't," Seraphina agreed, a small smile playing on her lips. "You were an idiot, Kaelin. You thought love was weakness. You thought a title made you a king." She leaned down, bringing her face level with his. "But you are learning. And lucky for you, I'm not just a queen. I'm an investor. And I see potential in you." She pulled him up. Kaelin didn't hesitate. He kissed her. It wasn't a polite wedding kiss. It was a collision. It was 6 months of hunger, rage, and regret pouring into a single moment. The crowd erupted into cheers, or maybe it was just the sound of the pack magic finally stabilizing, the ground beneath them settling as the true pair was reunited. When they broke apart, Kaelin looked at her crown. "So," he grinned, wiping lipstick from his mouth, "does this mean I'm the king, or am I just the husband of the CEO?" Seraphina laughed, and the sound was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. "Read the contract, Kaelin," she whispered, taking his hand. "We're partners, 50-50. They walked out of the cathedral together, not into the winter, but into the spring thaw. The snow was melting, the balance was restored, and Seraphina Hart, the rejected girl in the blue dress, had not just won the king, she had conquered the world. And that, my friends, is why you never judge a wolf by her dress or a CEO by her silence. Seraphina didn't just accept the rejection, she weaponized it. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of heartbreak, revenge, and sweet, sweet justice, smash that like button right now. It helps the channel more than you know. What did you think of Kaelin's redemption? Did he deserve a second chance, or should Seraphina have left him in the dust? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. We have a new, darker, grittier werewolf saga coming next week that involves a hidden baby and a mafia war you won't believe. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the best response to a rejection is a takeover.